Welcome back, students who are taking math for business and finance and math applications. Chapter 16, drill problems, the odd number problems, and it seemed, as I had said back in the theory videos, that this chapter is really dense. It's heavy in information, and as you can see, I'm doing only like one problem per video at this point in time, and most likely that trend will continue. So let's get on with 16-7. Okay, it says, excuse me, it says complete the comparative income statement and balance sheet for Logic Company rounding to the nearest hundredths. So I reproduced the income statement on this slide and the balance sheet on this slide. Okay, and as you can see, the balance sheet is being done in a what format? If you did the last problem and you recognize the difference, you'd see that this one is a vertical format, vertical comparison. Okay. And for the income statement, it is in a horizontal fashion. Okay, so it's a horizontal comparison, horizontal analysis. Okay, and one of the nice things is that we are using an income statement this time instead of just the balance sheet. Okay, so on the income statement, notice that everything on the income statement basically goes straight up and down as far as these accounts are concerned. Okay, it isn't like the balance sheet where you could do it up and down, but often you put the assets here and then your liabilities and equity over here. All right, your owner's equity over here, and sort of like across the page. Okay, with the income statement, like I said, straight up and down, and it's a lot easier because you don't have to be translating or the format's there. It's easier just to follow. But anyway, so remember with the horizontal format, horizontal analysis, we're doing everything across the page, and of course we have an amount here and we have a percent here. So all we're doing is just figuring out, we're taking the previous year against the current year, and you're looking at the difference. And in this case here, that's 4,000. And then the percentage is the 4,000 divided by whatever is in our base year of 2014. In this case here, it's 15,000, and that gives you a 26.67% difference between the two. Okay, so and if you're looking at in order to be able to speed things up, it's probably easier just to go down and do all of the amounts and then try and go and do all of the percents. Okay, but realize that what I just did for the gross sales, okay, this first line, is what you're going to do for each and every individual line. Okay, but for sake of speed, I feel it's just generally easier to do the math for the amounts and then to work out the percentages. So 1,000 minus 100 is 900. 18,000 less 14,900. Okay, draw an underline because there's an underline here, which means we have 5,100. And notice that if you're paying attention to the 2, I'm sorry, it's not 5,000, it's 3,100. Geez, can't even subtract. 3,100. And notice what just happened. Okay, I went 18,000 less 14,900, and I put 5,100. But I sort of in the back of my head got kind of confused. Why? Because I'm not just doing math. I'm also thinking. When I'm thinking, I'm looking here and saying, well, if this is 4,000 and I have less a sales return on allowance of 900, that means minus, because of the word less, because of its returns and allowances. Well, 4,000 has to be 3,100. So how can I have 5,100? How could I even have 5,000 when my gross sales was only 4,000? So I knew my math was wrong in there. Okay. So what I'm basically saying here is that, yeah, I just quickly did the math, but I'm also thinking about what's going on the statement as a double check as to whether my figures are right or wrong. Okay. So 12,000 less 9,000 is 3,000. Which means I should have, and again, we have an underline here, so we have an underline here, which means I should have $100 as gross profit, okay, and that's an underline, all right, and that makes sense, all right, 6,000 less 5,900 is 100, 3,100 less 3,000 is 100, okay, so 100 here, 200 here, 50 here, 60 here, an underline, and the difference is 410. Okay. And if I add those up, that's 21, that's 11, I'm sorry, 11. So I'm carrying a 1, 2, 3, 4, so 410 works. Okay, that's correct. Okay, and then I have my total operating, I have my income before interest and expense. And so I have, what I'm looking at here is I'm taking my gross profit here and I'm subtracting my total operating expenses here, okay? So when I have 2,190 less $2,500, I am going to have a negative number here, right? And that's a minus 310. And that works because if I'm looking at the gross profit here of 100, okay, and I'm subtracting the 410, I should have a negative 310. So my interest expense is an additional 60. I have an underline, and that means, remember, since this is a negative number, since I have 310, and my interest expense and expense is a negative number also, I'm actually adding those together, so I should end up with 370 here. But the way I get to 370 is by taking 1630 and subtracting the 2,000 in order to get the negative 370. Okay? And then I have for a provision on taxes of 640 less 800, which is a negative 160. And that means when I have 990 less 1200, I should have 210. Okay, because the provision on taxes is offsetting the income before taxes. So I'm actually, even though that's a negative number, I'm actually adding those two together as treating it as a positive number. Okay, in order to get 210. Right now, at this point in time, you may start getting yourself confused. Okay, for the simple reason, when I'm talking about double checking here, okay, if I was doing the math across, right? Yeah, here when I have 2190 less 2500, okay, that's a negative 310. When I have 560 less 500, that is a positive 60. Okay, and as I have 1630 less 2000, that is a negative 370. And when I have 640 less 800, that is a negative 160. And when I have 990 less 1200, that is a negative 210. Okay, that's when I'm doing the math across. But you're saying to yourself, well, you could be thinking to yourself, well, when you're double checking this, if I have a negative 370 here and a negative 160 here, so if I take a minus 370 and then a minus 160 and I punch that into the calculator, I'm going to end up with a negative 530, not 210. How is that? Okay, well, that comes from understanding what is on your income statement and how the numbers are derived. And I realize that's a little bit beyond the scope of the textbook right now, because they're not actually telling you how these numbers are derived. But for here, you're going to just have to take it as is when you think about it. Well, let me kind of explain just real quick for your FYI. And then we'll come back in another video and do the balance sheet here, okay, because we'll run out of time. I have income before interest and taxes, okay, and that was relatively simple to figure out because I had $6,000 in profit, and then I had my total operating expenses. So if I have revenues less expenses, right, gives me a profit or a loss, right? So I have 6,000 in revenue minus 3,810 gives me a profit of 2,190, okay? But then I have an interest expense, okay? Well, an expense is a negative, right? And you're taking away from the profit, so we're subtracting the 560, right? Now, notice over here when we're doing our comparison, we have a negative 310, right, is the difference between the 2 years. And even though this is a positive 60, right, when you're comparing across the 2 years, because it's an expense, it's actually a minus 60. You can't write minus 60 here, okay? Right here, you can't write a minus 60, okay? Because the difference between 560 and 500 is a positive 60, okay? But it all depends upon what you're looking at in the column, okay? In this column here, we're only looking at the increase and decrease in amounts. So yeah, that's a positive 60, but when I slide back over here as to understanding what's happening on the on the income statement, I had 2190, and since an interest expense is an expense, okay, this was profit here, okay? This 2190 was still profit, less my expense, and that's why my income before taxes, a reduction of the profit to 1630. Well, since I'm lowering here, I already had a negative number here, and I'm reducing that by another number, then that means I'm adding those two numbers together in order to get a further reduction of 370, even though that number there, that $60, is a positive number, okay? So, I know it's a little confusing, all right, but you have to be thinking about what's going on at all points in time, right? Now, let's take this one step further, okay? Here's a provision for taxes, okay? And so that's another negative number, okay? And that's why we have a reduction, so our bottom line net income is 990. But over here, all right, yeah, when we subtract the two, that's a negative number. But now why are we adding these two together in order to get only 210? Okay, because it's a provision for tax. Okay, it's over here, when we're looking at it over here, we're taking it out. We're taking that money out of the profit to put it aside. So that reduces, to put it aside for taxes. Okay, so that reduces our net income. But that's because we're just looking at income statement figures. Right here, right, all we're looking at is just the increase or decrease in the amounts. Okay, so if I had a negative 370 here, even though this is a negative 160, I'm adding it together because I'm pulling that money out. So I have a negative and a negative, but I'm adding it together. I'm adding the 160. I'm not adding a negative 160 to get 210, okay? Because that's money being pulled out. So you have to, that's what is meant by understanding what's going on your income statement, okay, or your balance sheet. You can't just read through the chapter really quick and not do the problems and understand what you're doing with the problems, because it's things like this that you have to learn that you can't see, okay? And anybody who's just copying, reads through the chapter, doesn't do the problems, and then tries to copy out of the book when they're doing a test question, they're not able to get it right, and they wonder why they're failing. Okay. Now realize that, yeah, I'm talking about math for business and finance, and this is just one question. Okay, but realize that the same thinking is going to carry over into your financial accounting and your managerial accounting. So that's why I'm stressing it a little bit right at this point in time. Even though it's higher level and you're not being given a full explanation like you would be in financial or managerial accounting, you're already starting to see part of the skill sets that you have to develop in order to get through those subjects. Okay, you're already starting to see, I mean, why is this a negative number and this a positive number, and I add them together, okay, and get a greater negative number? Then why am I taking this negative number and this negative number? If I added them together using a calculator, it should say I have a greater negative number, but no, I'm actually just adding the number, so I have a less of a negative number. Why is that happening? Well, that happens because you have to understand what's going on the income statement. Okay, now, could you have, the question, just came across my mind, if you just basically did the math across the page, just like we did here, this number less this number less, right? This number less this number, this one less that one, this one less that one, this one less that one. Well, you're going to get all of these numbers correct, okay? But the issue is as you saw me make a mistake up here, okay, when I wrote 5100, okay, well, if I was just doing the numbers across, I would have had 5100 here, but yet that would have been wrong. And yeah, I would have gotten that number right and that number right and that number right because I was just going across, but that number right there would have been wrong. And the issue becomes, do I understand what I'm doing? And if I do understand what I'm doing and I'm thinking about it and double checking my work with that thought process, okay, I was able to catch my mistake. Okay. So with that said, now we have to do the percentage columns, and I'm not going to go through all of these percents because I'm already 17 minutes into this video, and this was what was more important. Doing the percents is basically just taking, like you saw here, I had the, I'm taking whatever amount and then I'm dividing it by the 2014 figure. So for the sales returns and allowances, I have 900, and I'm going to divide it by the 100. Okay, and that's going to give me a 900%. If I did the next one, 3100, and I'm going to divide that by the 14.9. And that's going to give me 20.81%. Okay. So I'm not going to, go back and forth. I'm just going to list the percentages here. So that's 33. This one here is 1.69. This is 16.67. The 200 is 10% even. The 50 is 10% even. The 60 is 20% even. The 410 is 12.06. The negative 310 is a negative 12.04. I'm sorry, 12.40. The 60 is 12 even. The negative 370 is a negative 18.50. The negative 160 is a negative 20 even. And the negative 210 is a negative 17.50. Okay, so there you have it, and pause the video right here and you can copy those down. And remember, we're just taking whatever the amount was and we're dividing it by the number for the 2014 figure. Okay, and we'll move on to the next video and we'll cover the balance sheet.